Greetings and salutations, all you absolutely gorgeous individuals. Welcome back to another epi of League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you, rolling onwards, continuing the GOAT countdown. Back in the bottom lane today, looking at those AD carries. And when you look at every role, this is maybe you have the biggest group of guys who have that longevity, and you have the most stacked top and even top 10, really, when you're looking historically at ADCs. It's tough to break in.
The only position that I'm expecting to be more difficult than the ADC one is going to be mid lane. We've got quite a lot of superstars to go through, big careers there. But that's another list for another day. Today is the ADC list, and you'll see it right out of the gates when we start talking about honorable mentions. Some of these guys are the guy for their region, and you still can't even crack the top 8 of the ADCs of all time.
Yeah, I mean, you start right with the big dogs from the west, probably Double Lift, Reckless. You even talk about a guy like Sven, all kind of on the outside looking in. Maybe if you were extending this to 10 or 12, some of these Western goats would be getting in.
Not if we're going with 8. That's got to be the way that it is. But yes, if it was extended a little bit more, you'd find some of these Western familiar faces. Hell, even throw Gala in there as someone from the LPL that we have seen make a lot of moves and make
a guy like Elk is
happen.
Scratching his way in, probably.
Yes, he's knocking on that door, waiting to get inside this top 8. It's an exclusive club, but let's get started with number 8.
Yeah. First, we got to highlight 2 old guys who, again, aren't quite cracking the list, and that is Imp and Wei Zhao. Imp is a very polarizing one because I think a lot of people, they look at that Samsung White era and say, get him on there. He had a good run at LGD. But the longevity of the peak is way shorter than any of the guys on this top 8 for Imp.
It's a tall mountain. But it ain't a big trip to make it to the very top when you're talking about what Imp was able to do throughout his career. Yes, short-lived, very flash in the pan, let's just say it when we're talking about. But the heights that he was able to reach is notable to talk about throughout those splits where it is on fire for him. And Wei Zhao is another one of those ones where you go back in the old eras and you can find that this was someone who was a game changer back when the game was so begging to be changed in the early eras.
A guy who saw a lot of changes in the game is number 8 on this list. You're going season 2 to season 8, and Prey was always at the tip of your tongue when you're talking about an elite AD carry. We know all the crazy stats, multiple teams he thrived on, always losing to the ultimate world champion, but the main reason he's not maybe higher on this list is he was often kind of the Robin or 1B option on a lot of these star-studded rosters, but that's not to say that this dude wasn't one of the most consistent AD carries of all time.
It's one of those situations where I think when you had him on the lineup, you needed a 1A option because he was going to be the 1B option, but he certainly was, I think, out of all the guys that we have seen fill that type of role from this position, Prey is my number 1B option is the way that I'll go with this from how he played in his career. I think early season 3 to season 7 in the conversation for the top 3 ADCs in the world, the way that he was playing, what he was able to do. Of course, a big part of that I want to shout out is that synergy that he had with his bot lane partner in Gorilla. That was a big one that we saw throughout the course of their careers. The way they were able to duo team up and level each other up was a big part of it for me. Prey, of course, has probably one of, if not the most iconic ADC play of all time with the Ashe arrow all the way across the map.
Yeah, and I know you're calling him the sniper because it wasn't just that semifinals matchup where he had some Ashe arrows. He had him in the LCK too that were fully cross-map, interrupting recalls and other things. But yeah, the Ashe, Ezreal, Kai'Sa, all the staple LCK Korean AD carry champions, we know that he could excel on all of them. In terms of hardware, the dude at number 7 is maybe near the top, and that's because Bang was absolutely dominating during that run with SKT. And obviously people go very back and forth with him because you say, well, he got carried by a stacked T1 lineup, but he was actually the best AD carry at times in the world, or at the very least, again, in top 3 throughout all of that SKT run. And remember, there were so many times that comps were completely built around Bang being the hyper carry, even Faker piloting the Lulu to accelerate him.
It's unfortunate because the 100 Thieves stint and kind of the attempted return, I think, for Bang sours a lot of people on what he did during that tenure with T1, becoming one of the pillars of that SKT dynasty, the very first one we ever saw in League of Legends. Bang is a deserved and contributing member of that one when you look through it and you go through the history of it, where he fits in the grand scheme of the greatest ADCs of all time. He brings in that hardware, as you laid out. Those championships is a big part of what he brings to the table in this conversation. That doesn't mean he's lacking in a lot of the other statistics, in the wins, in the KDA. When you're looking through the champions, the big one for me is, of course, the Twitch. Over an 80% win rate for this guy on Twitch. Not necessarily the one that you would have immediately jumped to, but there have been some big Twitch performances from him. This was an important one to talk about. I think one that is clearly going to be passed as we're talking about the skill ceiling, the abilities the champions utilize for some of these guys later on in this list that we're going to talk about. But Bang has to be within your top 8 when you're talking about it purely alone based off of the hardware that he's bringing. And I think he solidifies his spot when you do a little bit more of a deep dive and you look at what his contributions were to those championships.
Yeah, I mean, outside of the international success domestically, probably the most success of all the guys on this list, which is what makes him a tricky guy to grade. A spot ahead of him is, oh look, another SKT AD carry, Gumayusi, another tricky one to do on this list, because I would accept arguments putting him maybe as high as 4 on this list, and you might say, how's he going to be ahead of Bang at such a young point in his career? But guys, he's been on SKT as long now, or almost longer than Bang was on SKT. The career has kind of snuck up on how many games Guma has amassed for T1, and there's no question, I think the ceiling that we've seen him reach is higher than what we got out of Bang.
This is one of those ones where it's hard because people are going to take it as this is his position, not understanding what speed he's driving through this racetrack to catch up to the other guys that are still going to be ahead of him on this list.
22.
Exactly. That's one of the things you've got to keep in mind when you're talking greatest players of all time and you're dealing with such incredible starts to careers like this current T1 dynasty has been able to build out. Gumayusi, no doubt. When you're looking at Bang, and I got to make that conversation, got to have those arguments talking about what contributions he made to that championship. There's zero questions about the contributions that Gumayusi has done to this dynasty for T1. He's jungler number 1 for this team in some of these situations, the way that he is stealing it. His champion pool that he has brought into the bottom lane for T1 doesn't matter the meta. There always seems to be 1 or 2 options that he can pick from in that top tier. Always has it, and he is never shy of the big play or the big moment for this organization. Gumayusi, it's a tough one because I think personally my bias would shine through and we'd have him a lot higher on this list type of situation, but it's when you got to check in and rein in when you're looking at some of these other guys that we will talk about and realizing it's just a matter of time. The speed that Gumayusi is going and the belief that you can have in him as a player, just a matter of time. Still, he keeps climbing this list.
Yeah, and how many times over the last 2 years, even when T1 has slumped, and let's face it, the domestic success hasn't been there to other SKT versions of some of these other guys on this list, but you've never been calling Guma out as the guy that's been the main issue. He has been that consistent carry even when T1 hasn't looked that great, and yeah, he's only going to climb higher on this list. And truthfully, 4 to 6, again, are incredibly close on this list. I feel like you can make arguments going up, down, or different angles, especially when you look at number 5, and we're talking about Viper, who main reason he's ahead of Guma, obviously, he's got that Worlds title. He's got a few extra years of playing on the Rift. And what's most amazing about Viper is even on some bad Hanwha Life rosters, a rough EDG roster towards the end of his time there, this guy has shined and had 1v9 performances. It doesn't matter if his team is the favorites to win it all or the favorites to miss out on playoffs.
Oh man, Viper, what a good one to step right in ahead of Gumayusi. And this is one that I think without the year that he had this year, you're talking about Guma leapfrogging him automatically in this type of situation. he manages to hold this spot with what was a fantastic year from him. Really one of these ones that did validate a couple of these years that you had seen where he was on teams struggling, or maybe his numbers individually weren't at the eye-popping levels that they always seem to be when you're talking about an ADC of this caliber. But Viper really stepped through this year. He was one of the driving forces for this Hanwha Life team, one of the most consistent engines that you could have in the LCK to give you that damage, to give you that reliability through these games. Viper was there all the time. And how many times did we see him truly show just what it means to be a Korean Ezreal? Just how many times this year did we get to see him dip and dancing all the way through team fights?
Yeah, Korean Ezreal, Korean Kaisa, Korean whatever champion it is. But yeah, we've seen even on Griffin, when somebody needed to step up, Viper time and time again is old reliable when it comes to some of these incredible team fights, flashing forward at the perfect time when no one else would be flashing forward. But this guy is an absolute menace in these late game team fights. And I think the biggest thing with AD carries, even more than other roles, is that clutch factor. Because when you're flashing forward, killing someone in 3 auto attacks in the late game, it's one movement that either makes or breaks the entire team fight. And pretty much all the guys on this list are the absolute best at doing that. But Viper is the best among the best. And sharing that clutch level is the guy who's in that 4th spot. And that is JackeyLove. From winning the World Championship in his rookie year, there's lots of memes about his flashing forward, but again, the clutch factor that this guy has, there's no one else you'd be relying on or confident in relying on in the LPL in that late game.
I don't know just how hot of a take this is. I'm gonna throw it out there and let's see what it is there. I feel like JackeyLove being at 4 is a disappointment compared to where his career started out and what type of trajectory a lot of people envisioned was going to be possible with not only how things played out, but how he was playing and what you could see as far as the talent level. To only be at this spot, it's going to sound harsh, it's going to sound like a hater thing, but I think it is a disappointment for JackeyLove to be here. That's just how good I think he can be and how dominant of a force he can be at his very best. But of course, need to talk about, we haven't always had JackeyLove at his very best. You got to take some of these amazing plays that of course you're seeing in the highlights along with the backwards Senna ult and things like that nature that happen with JackeyLove. I think one of the things again talked about is maybe a player that is dependent on what his support is, right, and how they facilitate him and how they contribute to it. We've seen that fluctuation in his career, but we have certainly seen the rebound in this past year, and that is one of the things I want to talk about because I think all the disappointment aside, this next era, this new, years that are going to be coming through for League of Legends, JackeyLove has got to be one of the top choices you could be looking at to be that tip of the spear for your team.
And let's be honest, when you look at this list as a whole, JackeyLove has had the lowest quality support partner probably throughout his career of anyone else on this list. Sure, Mako comes in, that's all great, but the eras between then, when you're getting a washed-up Baolan, you're having Yuyanjia come in and swapping out at times for top eSports, compared to everyone else on this list who have like Hall of Fame level supports throughout their career, it's been JackeyLove in the slums a little bit.
And it's a little crazy to think that when you look through, his champions and the win percentages, one of the top ones that stands out amongst them all with a lot of games played and a lot of wins, Senna! You don't think of JackeyLove as a Senna guy, you think of him as all these other exciting hyper carries, but the Senna is there with a high win rate. Of course, the Senna that we talked about with the backwards ultimate as well. More so, I think, a statement about where Senna has been in the meta than anything else, but JackeyLove certainly utilizing it. He's got a ton of wins to his credit, probably also part of where the LPL schedule comes through and the relentlessness of it, but JackeyLove is a phenomenal talent, one of these ones where it's incredible to say that a guy with over 530 something wins plus is a disappointment at this point because you know that there is more available for him.
Yeah, and I think we were expecting more with that Knight JackeyLove combo for them to accomplish more accolades when they were playing together on top esports, and they had their fair share of highlights, no question. But yeah, because of how fast his career started, you were expecting incredible high highs. But again, JackeyLove's only 23 because he was 17 winning that first world championship. So lots of career left to be had. The top 3 on this list, I think, is indisputable. You can put them in a different order, but it has to be these 3 players. And surprisingly enough, we are starting with Uzi in that 3 spot. And we've talked about this before, but when he retired, I was hard pressed to see anyone being able to take that top spot thrown from him. But now here we are with him sitting in at 3. But still, this was, when you talk about absolute peak levels of performance, probably unmatched.
I think Uzi himself would probably have said and made the guess when he did retire, did step away, that I don't think anybody's touching what I put out there type of thing. I don't think he could have envisioned the years that we have seen since then, the way the game would evolve, all these sorts of things. But Uzi, yes, unquestionable to me, one of the faces, the top 3 faces, the Mount Rushmore of ADCs in the game, the father of Chinese League of Legends. My man has been an incredible figure to go through in his career. It's one of these ones where it's tough for some people because you got to really rewind the clock to go back to the incredible dominant eras and just how oppressive he was in that bottom lane. Go to the RNG time of, when it was fully protect Mr. President, invest everything into Uzi, and everybody knew that that's exactly what you're going to do. That's how you're going to be a powerful team. And almost nobody could stop it. It took a Heimerdinger to stop that thing happening through this one. Uzi, a phenomenal player, one of these ones where I think you are, there is a blemish, of course, of the world championships that you can't put in there, but everything else is so powerful, so dominant that he enters this conversation even without those trophies to his name.
And let's remember those early years where he goes back-to-back World Finals, 2013, 2014. Aside from Insec, I don't think people can even name the other 8 players or 7 players that were on those rosters throughout, because afterward they didn't really have careers. So he dragged teams that had no business being in the finals in back-to-back years.
It's one of these situations where I think it is as clear as day when you look through all the lineups, all the games, everything that played through in Uzi's career and play it back and realize, you know what? A different team, a different player here or there type of thing is the difference you're talking about between a full trophy cabinet and the one that he's got now with just some LPL and MSI trophies tucked away in there. Uzi is a guy that I think unquestionably deserves this type of spot. I do want to give the little asterisk to say that kind of the 2-3 other guys that we talked about before this, that speed that we're talking about, they are approaching this one. That's because, again, Uzi, as great as he was, as dominant as he was, the runway is not incredibly long due to the health issues that we had and stepping away type of things. You can't have this permanent hold that we once thought he would have in this top era of the ADCs.
Yeah, JackeyLove, Viper, Guma, they're all sniffing over the next few years, riding into that top 3. But the guys who have surpassed Uzi already, post Uzi retirement, all of a sudden Deft had a resurgence last penultimate final dance. Obviously the incredible run to get that world championship, some standout moments on both Hanwha Life and individual plays on D plus Kia. The guys made worlds with 6 different organizations, the epitome of longevity when it comes to AD carries, and definitely that world championship was what pushed Deft over that final hurdle, as now these top 2 guys are the only ones to have won the LCK, the LPL, MSI, and a world championship.
The full trophy cabinet zone has entered into this type of one for the ADCs, and yes, Deft stepping in with the recent World Championship 2022. Love to talk about that one because it's incredible to look back through it and almost have enough of this runway room, have this longevity with Deft where you can talk about this. Sometimes star players, they only play in good to great environments, so you don't quite get the handle on just how much of a difference maker this one individual is in certain situations because they're not put in those situations, because things are operating right, because someone else is strong, all these type of things. Deft, we've seen enough runway, we've seen enough teams to know that he has been on ones where he is the only difference maker, the only one capable of being that, and he has found a way to get success, to achieve higher heights than ever would have been possible for these teams. Deft is an incredible figure, the longevity in his career. I think that this is a very deserved one where you didn't have him, when Uzi was retiring ahead of Uzi. Since then, the way that he has played, his commitment to the game, Deft has got to be here.
And since Uzi's retirement, I feel like multiple times we've had ooh, maybe Deft's a little bit washed, time to hang it up. But then he has an incredible stretch, and the fact that he's bouncing back multiple times from those allegations and claims of being washed and then coming out to put up a performance like he has over the last couple of years, absolutely deserving of that 2 spot. Not quite number 1, though, because a guy who his career has snuck up on how long it's been. I've still heard people saying, yeah, Ruler hasn't been around that long, but guys, now he's played longer than Uzi did. The only AD carry who's been around longer than him at this point is Deft, because we almost got 9 years of career for Ruler, and for, let's say, end of 2021 to all of 2023, it was basically 3 years that not only was this guy a top 3 AD carry in the world, you couldn't argue about him being number 1.
This is wild, Ruler. I can't believe we're here. Now, I don't mean can't believe we're here at number 1. I can't believe we're here. The longevity of his career, when you bring it up like that, it has blown right by. And I think a big part of that is just how good, how dominant he has been. He's breezed through any type of challenge, any type of opponent, really, except Faker. Talk about that one a little bit.
But he did it once, so it's fine.
He did get it once, and that is obviously a world champion for your man Ruler. And I will say bias, probably my favorite world champion skin. Love that Xayah skin. It's got the worst signature out of all of them, for sure. But
that's just lore accurate,
Yeah, but I love the skin, and I love the way Ruler plays the game. He has been the most impressive ADC, I think, within the last 5 years, no question. And especially if you go to the last 3 years, the dominance that he has been able to show, the icon status that he has raised himself to in the LPL through how good he can be with JDG, how much of a force he is on his own, and how much of a force he is with a team behind him. This Ruler is serious business. Number 1, the greatest ADC of all time.
And listen, the 3 of the 4 top 80 carries here, or top 5, Viper, Deft, and Ruler. The fact that all 3 of these guys were able to dominate in the LCK, go over to the LPL, and immediately dominate, be one of, if not the best ADCs in an entirely new region, is just a testament to how good they are.
Especially one where, I don't think it's any real secret. The requirements to be a dominant ADC in the LCK and the LPL, yes, they're both very high. They're both very different in what you're expecting and what you're demanding from them and what you need to be able to do. So to see that adaptation, to hit the ground running, that absolutely is another thing in their favor. Over 600 wins for your boy Ruler over the course of these years. Still rocking, 64, 65, percent win rate throughout all those ones. Nice. This has been an absolute monster of a career.
We said it with Uzi, but I'm going to say it again for Ruler. I'm hard-pressed to see someone taking him over as that number 1 spot, especially when he has no signs of slowing down, regardless of what team he ends up on next. Sitting safely for now in that number 1 spot. But that is it today for League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you. Beautiful people. Thanks for hanging out, as always, and we will catch you on that flippity flip.